there. Welcome back to Virtual Shakeup. I'm delighted to introduce Bo Bruskern, who is the CEO of Lendit FinTech.
Hi, Heather.
How are you?
Awesome. Thank you.
Bo, would you like to give us a little introduction about your background and you're the co-founder of Lendit FinTech in addition to being the CEO?
For sure. Thank you for the opportunity. First, before any intros, I just want to tip my hat to you and Ralph and Yerke and Harai. You're putting on a phenomenal show, and I appreciate the work you've put into it. So my name is Bo Bruskern. I am co-founder and CEO of Lendit FinTech. We are 100% focused on the fintech industry. We were founded because we needed a conference to go to, and we couldn't find one that was really, that was good enough. We founded our company back in 2013 when fintech we felt was on a tear. We didn't have any idea how what was before us and how big it was going to get. And previous to Lendit, I've been an entrepreneur for about 15 years now, and that includes startups mainly in the financial services world. And before that, I was a venture capitalist in Silicon Valley.
Perfect. Well, Bo, you're also part of a group that we run at H2K Partners, Level Up, and you're always a very active and engaged member. So I'm really excited that you're here.
Thank you.
Before we jump in, there's a poll that we want the audience to answer, and it's about what your function is. So, and we'll bring the results up in a bit. So, one of the things that has fascinated me about your story is you, again, as a startup, you had some core conferences, but your major conference was a New York in-person event. I think you mentioned there are about 4,000 attendees. Average ticket price for in-person is $2,000.
Yep.
And you also had like a significant number of very high ticket sponsors involved, like some in the six figures.
That's right. Yeah, I can review that really quickly. And look, I'll be as transparent as I can, which is complete open kimono with the audience here, because we're all in this together. So last year we did about just shy of 10 million in revenue. Most of that, like 80% of that, comes from the USA conference, or came from. This is 2019. Of the 4,000 people that joined, roughly half are paying. So 2,000 people at $2,000, of $4 million of revenue just from the audience. It's a little higher than that. And then balance from sponsors, and that's how you get up to the 9 million. Yes, the largest ticket price, about $200K for the sponsors. That would be our industry leader level, and lowest is startup at 5,000. But let's see, average would be last year, I think we hit about $22,000 per sponsor and hit 100 and I forget how many, close to 200 sponsors, not quite 200, but right in that range. Mm-hmm. So it was hard to say goodbye to that, and we had to say goodbye to that, just as we were running out of cash in the early days of COVID. Right in March, I think, is when we killed the conference.
Okay, but you were able to reinvent it as a virtual event in September, correct?
Yes. First, we postponed live event in September. We were just as hopeful as many were. And then we switched from, we're very careful with our language here. We never canceled that show. Yeah. We just converted it to a virtual conference. And that's when, so we had to, first we sold our sponsors, and mainly, conversation about sponsors would be, first we sold them on the big show in May before pre-COVID. Then we sold them on, we're going to do it in late September at the Javits Center in New York. Like, same deal, just delayed. And then we had to sell them again. And at this point, the sales team is pissed because they're like, this is the third time I'm selling it. And this time we don't even get to show up and drink beer. We're going to be showing up online, and what a drag that's going to be. So it's tricky.
Well, actually, that whole sales narrative there is one I think a lot of event organizers went through. You were selling the same customer, the same event about 3 times over. And each time it was a different narrative. So with that said, I believe you mentioned that you were able to sell tickets still, but your price went from 2,000 to 600
on an average. Yeah, the highest price was $895. So that was a $900 ticket, but the average selling price was $600. Yeah.
Right. Okay. But still, that's amazing to have been able to sell the tickets. And I believe that must have a lot to do with the fact that your audience knows the quality of the content and had engaged with you. The second part was you were able to actually retain a good portion, especially your largest sponsors stayed with you for the same price for that event, for the virtual?
Yes, with a big asterisk. So that's when I can explain that. Is now a good time to dive in there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So clearly someone that forked over 200K or even 75K or even 35K is going to look at a virtual conference and say, look, I love you, but it's not worth it. And so what we did was we created a whole bunch of digital media inventory. And one of the things that really saved us were virtual panels / webinars. We created a whole bunch of products. We started monetizing our newsletter, our blog posts, our white paper distributions, our white paper writing, like anything we could do to take let's call it like a $60,000 sponsorship and say, okay, this is the inventory you bought before, and this is the inventory we're converting it to. Because we know you're a business that still needs clients. You still need customers. And we have this big list. We've got 35,000 people that pay attention to us, plus more on the prospect list. You know, our total audience is pretty big. Our engaged audience is really strong. And we have all the people you want to talk to. So let's just engage them differently. So when we converted, let's say a $60,000 sponsorship, we were converting from, everything on floor and, in banner and sort of live in real life, to a blend of digital activities. And a lot of that value, maybe in many cases, 80% of that value was done outside of the conference in those virtual, in the digital inventory that we created, not in the 3 days of the conference.
So what you mentioned, before COVID, you would have considered yourself an event organization. Right now, post-COVID, you describe yourself as what?
We are a media company, full stop, and a digital niche media company. So we took our mission and just made it more immediate. And our mission has really always been to ask the toughest questions of the industry, and then find the people that can answer those questions and put them on stage. So we used to do that 3 times a year. It became very clear to us, amidst all the teeth gnashing of the March, April timeframe, that it became more important for us to do that than ever before. And so we really, and to do it immediately. We can't wait. Like once we push the date to September, our audience needed questions answered now. Like, in the financial services world, it's what's consumer credit going to do? Like, are we going to have a mass amount of charge-offs on these loan books? How do we become a digital bank when we're a community bank, in whatever, Denver, Colorado, where I live? And so those kinds of questions need to be answered immediately. And so we took our purpose and just did that. And we put it online and started asking and answering the questions immediately. And that turned into the real revenue stream. So short answer, digital media company. Longer answer is we had to create all that stuff on the fly.
Well, you're a startup, and again, that's an underlying theme here in Virtual Shakeup is this the startup mentality is so critical now because of agility, need to pivot. It's the pressure, not knowing all of that. I just want to bring in the results from the first poll we did, and then I have a second poll. Ralph. So your function, event management is 60%, executive leadership. Oops, sorry, Ralph, I took your role.
I'm just going to keep quiet. You keep going. Doing a great job.
So executive leadership is 30%, 6 is marketing, 6 is sales, and no one from Operations logistics. That's interesting. All right. The next poll is actually how well or not does curated networking meetings impact customer satisfaction and retention? And this is not I want the audience to put in what you think. We have a case study, so that's not like a perfect answer, but we'll come back with the results. So now with this September event, you were able to retain, i.e. this idea that you were charging for tickets. It was less, but you still sold, right? You did not say free. You were able to retain the majority of your sponsors, not just though for the event, you had to give ancillary services. You now believe you're a 365, you're a 365 media company. But I want to dive into the September event specifically because you talked about this customer experience that you delivered right off the bat, which I thought was just phenomenal. And it had a lot to do with networking. So can you tell us what you did?
Yeah, well, and this is, I would say this to anyone on any platform, but we happen to be on the Brella platform, and I'm about to dive into some really positive comments about Brella. But we've been working with Jyrki and his team since the dawn of time. We were definitely not the first event, but we were among the first to adopt, and the one-on-one networking thing became kind of a hallmark of a Lendit FinTech conference. At some point, we decided we're really good at content, but people are actually coming for the networking. Like they use content as an excuse to come, and then they just go hog wild on one-on-one networking. We'd have this big, Brella area right in the middle of the show floor, 100 tables. And we found a direct correlation between Net Promoter Score and the number of meetings people had on Brella. So we really started pumping that. So now we had a call with Jyrki back in March, April timeframe. Started talking to him about like, okay, so what's going to happen here? And I saw absolute panic in his eyes, and I think he saw the same in mine. But now we're through, here we are in December. Those guys just killed it. They went straight to video. They adopted all these things that you see today and continue to innovate just like they have since the 2016 timeframe when we first adopted them. So that networking was a big part of the event. What we discovered was very similar. Now, in the virtual event that we just had in September, our Net Promoter Score was our third highest ever, including all the events we've ever done. And it was a virtual event. That's really hard to do. I think and we got a 35, just to be very clear. 35, I think we had a 38 at one point, and then we had an 80 something for our LATAM event last year, which was just like stunning. But anyway, so we just killed it. And a lot of the comments that came back were, hey, look, the audience was so open to meeting. People were engaged. If I reached out, people got back to me, and we had productive one-on-one video networking. And oh, by the way, it was easier because I could go straight from a keynote or a panel right into my one-on-one networking and then bounce back. In the content stage as well, we have multiple tracks running at multiple times. We saw that people were bouncing between the tracks and settling in. So you go, oh, this track looks good, or this session looks good, and then you got kind of a panel. Maybe it's not a dud, but it's not really speaking to one audience member, and so they flip to another channel, and then they flip to a third, and they settle in there and watch. And the engagement was phenomenal. People were really tuning in. And then I don't think it was available for our USA conference, but for a Europe conference immediately after, Brella put on this picture-in-picture thing that we have now. So like if you guys anyone in the audience wanders away, the only thing you lose is the poll feature and the Q&A feature on the right, but you still have the picture-in-picture thing going on, which is fantastic because you can start networking and setting up meetings and stuff, and you're not missing out on the channel that you were tuned into. So that whole package really worked really well for our audience. Probably not for everyone, certainly not for everyone, but it was exactly what we needed.
Well, in addition to the meetings and, the Brella networking, you also had a networking event and speed dating, which
Yes.
can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so we did. I consider the Brella networking speed dating. We also had a more random approach. Oh boy, we call it networking roulette. Oh man, I've got to figure out. It'll come to me. The vendor will come to me. But they really and we really pushed hard on them to innovate. We had a couple of trials with them in June that some worked, some utterly failed. But by the time September rolled around, we were able to do this networking roulette, and it is a 5 to 8 minute. I think that we settled on 8-minute sessions. Really a slick technology where everyone piles into this thing. So you get hundreds of people in there. You kind of say, you give some idea of what you want to talk about. And then there's a matchmaking thing in the background. They call it AI. It might be AI, probably not, but there's some sort of algorithm. And then it matches you much more randomly. So I'm choosing more by topic instead by person. And it worked really well. That got excellent reviews. We didn't run that all day. It's more of an event within an event. And we did that after days 1 and 2.
It reminds me of an event that I helped where they had, and again, it was in person at a Swank Hotel, very high level executives in commercial real estate. So they had the meetings during the day, but right prior to the cocktail reception, they did the speed dating. And I was shocked how many people did it at that level. But basically you said, well, it's not that big of an investment for me. So I get to meet more people. You're helping me do it. If I don't like them, it's 6 minutes. I get to go to the next one. And then everyone moved into, I believe on your side, but in virtual, a reception.
Right. And so much easier to extract yourself from a conversation you don't want to be in when the screen sort of fades. You're like, okay, nice meeting you. And you go to the next person. You only wasted 8 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Whereas at a bar, sometimes I'll get just backed into a corner.
Yeah.
And that's dreadful. So there's no awkwardness there, which is great.
All right. Well, I know we have some questions from the audience, but we also have poll results. Let's see. How well? Oh, here's Ralph.
Yeah, I seem to be. I'm getting backed into a corner. I can't speak unless I'm on the stage. How well or not does curated networking and meetings improve customer satisfaction and retention? So 39% of people said 75%. I tell you what, if I'd had a drink at the bar, I would be struggling to follow this. But 39% of you said 75%, and 30% of you said 50%. So pretty high.
So a recent case study that Brella did, and it wasn't Bo's case study, but I think his CSAT, his scores tell you enough. I want to say that there was, for the attendees that engaged in networking, there was a 60% retention rate for the next event. So again, it's just this networking part for virtual events, and when in-person comes back, helping the curating it is so critical. All right, let's go to the questions from the audience. So, did the virtual event exceed sponsor expectations or underwhelm them? Will they return?
Great question. One thing we didn't touch on, but I know has been touched on by other speakers, is sponsor education. And we did invest a lot in that, a lot of time. It was not expensive at all, but it was, we put on several webinars just for sponsors to join and try to really get them to understand what they were stepping into, how to engage the audience, what to expect, and things like that. Our sponsors were overwhelmingly positive and surprised. And that's one thing I didn't mention as part of the NPS. There might have been some surprise factor in there where people came in thinking, well, I kind of have to do this. It's going to be awesome. And they came in and they're like, wow, production value high, meeting value high. And that just sort of gave a lift on everyone, including sponsors. So, even our top dollar sponsors, I think, were really pleased. And yes, we will retain those, and I think win more because we have this proof point.
Yep. No, absolutely. Absolutely. So the next question is, what exactly did you do outside of the event to keep your sponsors on board? I think we touched upon this a little bit more, but maybe recap it.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, so of the 174 that were signed up for the live event, we retained 94, and it was a lot of selling. It was a lot of, going back and saying, look, we're here's the inventory you bought. Here's what we're converting it to. Are you in or are you out? And that was the primary activity. There was certainly some sponsor education and things like that. But what we found is people weren't, in general, people aren't paying attention. And that was that surprise factor. So yeah, we told them it was going to be awesome. We told it was going to be TV quality and on and on and on. And those that stayed, I think just stayed out of a sense of loyalty, and I got nothing else that I can do. Mm-hmm. I kind of have to do this. So there was a little bit of that, which of course isn't ideal, but now we've got one under our belt. We have more proof points that we can go back to our sponsors with. Yeah.
And just to add to that, just because we were shut down doesn't mean these people didn't have to do business, right? And fill pipeline and leads. Those KPIs still existed. So as you went and offered more value, it wasn't just about the virtual event in September. You were doing webinars, you were offering online components as media packages.
And one other really important thing was that we took the lead question off the table. It's the first time we've ever guaranteed leads. We didn't sell leads, but we guaranteed leads based on level of sponsorship. We said, look, if you don't get enough leads at your booth, for the lowest level $10,000 sponsor, we said, we will give you the segmentation of, like company name and level of individual for the entire audience, and you'll get to choose 100 people that you want contact information for. Yeah. And so we took that away from the discussion, which the sales team was jubilant about. Mm-hmm. I said, there's another question about diving a little deeper on this. I will say that we went into Salesforce and took all the closed ones and swapped them into prospects essentially for the virtual event. So we resold every single one.
So there's a last question here that I'd like us to address, because it sounds like the matchmaking and meetings is a core value prop for both the attendee and sponsor. And this one of our people asking the question is, what is most important to keep in mind when connecting people through matchmaking at a virtual event?
I think some of it is just encouragement. Like the platform is gonna dictate how it happens. And I have very strong feelings about what works, and speed dating works, and the way that Brella does it, I think, is very, very good. Mm. But there's other platforms out there, and I'm sure they all have great benefits. In order to get people to buy in, it's a virtuous cycle or a vicious cycle. If nobody's there, nobody's there. So putting networking first, making it almost a mandate. If you're joining the conference, you are automatically sort of involved in this pool of networking people, and then continuing to positively reinforce that throughout the show is just to say, hey, don't forget to sign up for your meetings. If someone has invited you, please decline or accept. We hammer on that one, because if people aren't declining meetings, that the slots are booked up and all that. But it's really just sort of putting it first and foremost in your value prop with your customers and saying, do this. And then when they do it, they're like, well, yeah, that was really valuable.
I couldn't agree more. I think one of the biggest mistakes that event organizers make when they do add in the matchmaking and meetings is that they're not educating their audience from the get-go, i.e. even before they register, is that when you come to this event, when you register, part of your experience, your 3 value props is meetings, content, and blah, So right. It's that whole customer success for the attendee. Well, thank you so much, Bo.
Thank you.
A really, really enlightening session.
That was awesome. Thanks for allowing me to join, and great job so far. It's been a fantastic conference.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Bo, and what some fantastic points as well, especially about keeping meetings. That's a bugbear for me as well. It's tricky, some of these event platforms. Well, that's it for this session. We've got another network break. So funnily enough, it's a good point for me to say, if you've got a meeting, please keep it. If you haven't, go and find somebody to have a meeting with or take a break. And we'll be back in about 35 minutes time with Corbin Ball, talking about moving from virtual to hybrid events, how to maximize your success. And if you don't know who Corbin is, you might have heard me in the welcome talk say that certainly some of my team in America are very excited by this keynote, because Corbin is a veteran and much lauded speaker on event tech and all things events. So we look forward to that. But we'll see you in about 35 minutes time.